The orbital bombardment was Grand Marshal Vek's idea. He was the supreme commander of all HFY forces in human space. He had grown tired of the ground war. He had grown tired of losing soldiers to ghosts and miners and farmers with weapons. He wanted the war to end quickly. So he gave the order to burn the human cities from space. The target was Terra Nova's capital, a city of 2 million humans, families, children, old people, workers coming home from their jobs, students walking to their schools, ordinary people living ordinary lives. The plasma bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it ended, there was nothing left but ash and melted rock. 2.3 million humans died in a single day, the largest loss of life in human history since something they called the World Wars on their homeworld. Grand Marshal Vek expected surrender. He expected the humans to see the power of the Dominion and accept defeat. He expected grief to break their will. He expected terror to make them submit. He did not understand humans at all. The news spread across human space in hours. Every colony, every station, every ship. They all heard what had happened on Terra Nova. They all saw the images of the burning city. They all felt the rage building in their hearts. Human military recruitment increased by 400% in 1 week. Civilians who had never held weapons volunteered to fight. Old soldiers came out of retirement. Young people lied about their age to join. Factories that had made farming equipment began making weapons. Ships that had carried cargo began carrying soldiers. Admiral Quan Suyao took command of the human fleet. She was a small woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She had fought in human wars for 40 years. She had never been defeated, and she had a personal reason to want revenge. Her daughter had lived in the capital city of Terra Nova. Her message to the HFY fleet was broadcast on every frequency. Every HFY ship heard it. Every HFY soldier heard it. Vorath heard it on his carrier, and he felt his blood turn cold. Attention, HFY forces. You killed our families. Now we kill your empire. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is a promise. We are coming for you. All of you. Every ship. Every station. Every soldier. You wanted war with humanity. Now you have it. The human fleet should have been easy to destroy. Their ships were smaller. Their weapons were weaker. Their technology was decades behind the Dominion. The numbers said the HFY would win any space battle easily. The numbers were wrong. The humans did not fight like other species. They did not form battle lines. They did not exchange fire from safe distances. They charged directly at the enemy. They flew their ships into the teeth of HFY weapons. They died by the thousands, but they kept coming, and they used tactics that no sane species would consider. The HFY squadron was the most famous. They were fighter pilots, young humans barely old enough to fly. They painted demons on their ships, creatures from human mythology called HFY, trickster spirits, bringers of chaos. Their mission was simple: fly into HFY carrier bays and explode. Vorath was on the carrier Endless Victory when they came. The battle had been raging for hours. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they refused to retreat. They kept pushing forward, kept attacking, kept dying. Then the HFY squadron appeared. There were 12 of them. Small fighters, fast, nimble. They dodged through the plasma fire like insects avoiding raindrops. They headed straight for the carriers, straight for the massive ships that held thousands of soldiers, straight for the heart of the HFY fleet. The defensive guns tried to stop them. They destroyed 6 fighters before they reached the carriers, but 6 got through. 6 human pilots flew their ships directly into the open hangar bays of 6 HFY carriers. And then they detonated their power cores. Vorath remembered the moment of impact. He remembered the ship shaking beneath his feet. He remembered the explosion ripping through the decks. He remembered the screaming and the fire and the bodies flying through the air. He remembered seeing the pilot's face on the security feeds. A young human female named Han Yoonji. She was laughing as she flew into the hangar bay. Actually laughing. She knew she was about to die, and she was laughing because she was about to take so many enemies with her. Her fighter struck the ammunition storage. The secondary explosion was even larger than the first. It tore through the carrier like paper. It killed 2,000 Kethari soldiers in an instant. It nearly killed Varath. He lost his arms pulling himself free from the wreckage. The metal had pinned him against a wall. He had to tear himself loose or burn to death. The pain was incredible. The blood was everywhere. But he survived. He was one of only 300 survivors from a crew of 5,000. Around him, the other carriers were burning too. The Dokkaebi squadron had done their work well. 6 carriers destroyed. 12,000 soldiers dead. 12 human pilots had achieved what an entire fleet should not have been able to do. But the humans were not finished. Their escape pods were launching from damaged ships. Vorath watched them on the few working screens. Standard behavior. Survivors abandoning destroyed vessels. Nothing unusual except the pods were not fleeing. They were accelerating. Toward the Kethari ships, the humans had loaded their escape pods with explosives. They were using them as missiles. Pilots who had lost their ships were climbing into pods and ramming them into enemy vessels. They were trading their lives for one more kill, one more damaged ship, one more step toward victory. The Battle of Harvest Moon lasted 11 hours. When it ended, the Kethari had lost 60% of their forward fleet. Thousands of ships. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The greatest military disaster in Dominion history. And the humans kept coming. Admiral Kwan did not stop at defending human space. She pushed forward into Kethari territory, past their defensive lines, toward their colonies, toward their homeworld. The hunted had become the hunters. The prey had become the predators. The Dominion was not prepared for this. They had expected to conquer a weak species. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and terrible. Something that did not know how to surrender. Something that fought with a fury that bordered on madness. The war lasted 3 more years. 3 years of burning ships and dying soldiers. 3 years of humans pushing deeper into Kethari space. 3 years of the Dominion losing everything they had built. The humans liberated the 40 species the Kethari had conquered. They freed worlds that had been under Dominion control for centuries. They gave weapons to slaves and taught them how to fight. The Dominion found itself facing enemies on every front. And then the human fleet arrived at the Kethari homeworld. Varath was not there for that moment. He was in a hospital, learning to live with 2 arms instead of 4. But he heard the stories. Everyone heard the stories. Admiral Kwan had enough firepower to burn the Kethari homeworld to ash. She had enough ships to blockade the planet forever. She had enough hatred in her heart to kill every Kethari that had ever lived or ever would live. But she did not. Instead, she offered peace. She offered terms that were harsh but survivable. She demanded freedom for all conquered species. She demanded reparations for the families of the dead. And she demanded one thing that seemed strange to everyone who heard it. She demanded that the Kethari remember what they had done. Remember what humanity had done in response. Remember that humans were not soft, not weak, not prey. Remember that humans could have destroyed the Dominion completely. Remember that they chose not to. The Kethari High Command accepted the terms immediately. They had no choice. But Varath always wondered about Admiral Kwan's final demand. Why was remembering so important to her? Why did she want the Kethari to remember instead of simply forgetting and moving on? He understood now, 30 years later. The memory was the weapon. The memory was the warning. The memory was the cage that kept the Dominion from ever attacking humanity again. Because the humans wanted the Kethari to know, deep in their hearts, that mercy was a choice. And choices can be changed. Mila had stopped breathing. She sat frozen in her chair, her eyes wide, her antennae pressed flat against her head. The sign of pure terror in a Kethari. They could have killed everyone, she whispered. They could have destroyed your entire species. Yes, Vareth said simply. They could have. They had the power. They had the justification. We had killed millions of their civilians. We had tried to conquer their worlds. By any standard of war, they had the right to exterminate us. But they didn't. No, they didn't. And that is what keeps me awake at night. Not the violence. Not the dying. Not the friends I lost or the arms I left behind. What keeps me awake is the knowledge that humans showed us mercy. And mercy, young one, is terrifying. He leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering in the dim light. Because mercy means they made a choice. They chose to let us live. They chose to let our children grow up. They chose to let our civilization continue. And every day, every single day, they could choose differently. They could decide that mercy was a mistake. They could come back and finish what they started. And we would have no way to stop them. Laura's voice dropped to a whisper. That is why I do this. That is why I tell these stories. Because the young ones need to understand. Humans are not our friends. They are not our enemies. They are something far more dangerous. They are the species that could destroy. The first light of dawn began to filter through the windows of the recording studio. Vareth had been talking for hours. His throat was dry. His body was exhausted. But his mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in years. Mila sat across from him, changed somehow. She had walked into this room, a young academic looking for interesting stories. She would walk out knowing the truth about the galaxy, knowing the truth about the species that every other civilization had learned to treat with respect. There is one more thing I must tell you, Boris said quietly. One more memory that I have never shared with anyone. The moment that broke something inside me. The moment that made me understand humans better than I ever wanted to. Mila nodded silently. Her recording device continued its steady blinking. After the Battle of Harvest Moon, I was taken to a medical station. A neutral facility where wounded soldiers from both sides received treatment. The humans had agreed to this. They had agreed to let their enemies be healed alongside their own people. At the time, I thought this was strange. Now I understand it was just another form of warfare. They wanted us to see their mercy up close. Vareth closed his eyes. The memory was sharp and painful, like broken glass in his mind. There was a human soldier in the bed next to mine. A young male named Yoonji Yuk. He had lost his legs in the battle. An explosion had taken them both, just below the knee. He was learning to use artificial limbs, learning to walk again, learning to live with what the war had done to him. Did you speak to him? Not at first. I was afraid. I had spent years killing his people. I had commanded soldiers who burned his cities and murdered his civilians. I expected him to hate me. I expected him to attack me the moment he had the chance. But he never did. He just lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. For days, we existed side by side without speaking. Voreth opened his eyes. They were wet with something that might have been tears. Then one night, I woke up screaming. The nightmares had come again. The ghost in the forest, the pilot laughing as she died, the faces of all the soldiers I had lost. I was shaking and crying, and I could not stop. I had not cried since I was a child. But that night, everything came out. All the fear, all the guilt, All the horror. He paused to collect himself. Jiuk was awake. He was watching me. I expected disgust. I expected anger. But he just looked at me with those strange human eyes. And then he spoke. What did he say? Vorith's voice cracked. He said his family had lived in the capital city of Terra Nova. His mother, his father, his little sister. They had been teachers and farmers and students. They had never hurt anyone. And they had all died in the bombardment. All of them. He was the only one left. Mila covered her mouth with her hands. I expected him to kill me then. I had helped plan that bombardment. I had watched the plasma fall from orbit. I was responsible for his family's death. He had every right to reach across the space between our beds and end my life. I would not have stopped him. I would have deserved it. But he didn't. No, he didn't. He looked at me for a long time. A very long time. And then he said something I will never forget. He said, I do not forgive you. I will never forgive you. What you did to my family cannot be forgiven. But the war is over, and I am tired of hating. So go home, Vorith. Go home and live whatever life you have left. And remember. Remember what you did. Remember what we did. Remember everything. Vorith's remaining hands trembled on the table. Then he turned away and went back to sleep, just like that. As if he had not just given me the greatest gift and the heaviest burden anyone had ever given me. He let me live. Not because he forgave me. Not because he thought I deserved it. But because he was tired. Because the war was over. Because humans know when to stop fighting. The room was very quiet. The dawn light had grown stronger, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. I never saw Gyuyuk again after I left the medical station. I do not know what happened to him. Perhaps he rebuilt his life. Perhaps he found new family. Perhaps he is still somewhere in human space, walking on artificial legs, carrying memories of the people he lost. I hope he found peace. I hope he found happiness. I hope the universe gave him something good to replace everything it took away. Vorith stood slowly. His old joints protested. His missing arms ached with phantom pain. But he walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were waking up to a new day, living their lives, loving their families, building their future. That is my testimony, he said, without turning around. That is what I want future generations to know. Humans are not monsters. They are not demons. They are not the villains that some of our politicians try to make them. They are just people. Strange, soft, short-lived people who love fiercely and fight harder than any species in the galaxy. He turned to face Mila one last time, but they are also dangerous. More dangerous than anything we have ever faced. Not because of their weapons, not because of their numbers, not because of their technology. They are dangerous because they will do anything, absolutely anything, to protect what they love. They will die for it. They will kill for it. They will burn worlds and shatter empires for it. And when the fighting is done, they will offer mercy to their enemies, not because they are weak, but because they are strong enough to choose kindness over revenge. He walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. It is a choice, and they can choose differently, anytime, for any reason. That is what I want the young ones to understand. That is what I want your archive to preserve. Humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of what they do, but because of what they choose not to do. And we must never ever give them a reason to change their minds. Mila reached out and stopped the recording. The blue light went dark. The room fell silent. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for sharing this. Vorith nodded slowly. Thank you for listening. It has been difficult, but necessary. The truth must be remembered, even when it is painful. Especially when it is painful. He looked at the window one more time. The stars were fading as the dawn grew brighter. A new day was beginning. A day of peace. A day of trade and diplomacy and cooperation between species that had once been enemies. But Vorath knew the truth. Peace was not permanent. Peace was a choice, just like mercy. And choices could be changed. Somewhere in human space, Admiral Quan was probably waking up in her retirement home. Sergeant Li Jiwon was probably walking through his mountains. Yoon Juk was probably living whatever life he had built from the ashes of his loss. They were ordinary people now. Old soldiers with old memories, but they could become something else at any moment. All of them. All the billions of humans scattered across the galaxy. They could remember what the Kethari had done. They could remember the burning cities and the dead families and the years of war. And they could choose to stop being merciful. That was the truth Vorath lived with every day. That was the nightmare that would never fully fade. Not the violence, not the death, but the mercy. The terrible, terrifying mercy of a species that could destroy you but chose not to. He hoped the young ones would understand. He hoped they would remember. Because the humans certainly would. Humans always remembered. And they never, ever forgot. The recording was finished. The testimony was complete. And somewhere in human space, the sun was rising on another peaceful day. For now, Terra Nova was supposed to be simple. That was what the intelligence report said. A farming colony. 50,000 humans. Minimal military presence. The planet had forests and mountains and rivers. It had cities built in valleys and villages scattered across green hills. It looked peaceful. It looked weak. Vorath's battalion landed in the southern region. 10,000 soldiers. Heavy armor. Air support. Everything they needed to crush a primitive colony. His superior was Commander Thesk, a veteran of 20 campaigns. Thesk had never lost a battle. He expected to add Terra Nova to his list of victories within one rotation. The forests changed everything. They were not like the forests on the Kethari, homeworld. These trees were tall and thick. Their leaves blocked the sunlight. Their roots created tangles on the ground. The undergrowth was dense and dark. Perfect for hiding. Perfect for hiding, perfect for hunting. The humans knew these forests. They had lived in them for 3 generations. They knew every tree, every stream, every shadow. And they used that knowledge to become invisible. The first attacks came at night. Kethari sentries disappeared without sound. Patrols went out and never came back. Supply lines were cut. Communication equipment was destroyed. The humans struck like ghosts and vanished like smoke. Commander Thesk ordered his soldiers to burn the forests. They tried. The humans simply moved deeper into the darkness. They came out at night when the fires died down. They killed more sentries, more patrols, more soldiers who thought they were safe. Vorath remembered the fear that spread through his troops. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had faced enemies with claws and fangs and poison. But they had never faced an enemy they could not see. They had never faced an enemy that hunted them in their sleep. The humans used strange tactics. They painted their faces with dirt and leaves. They wore clothing that matched the forest colors. They moved slowly, carefully, patiently. They could lie still for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They did not attack with honor. They attacked with efficiency. And then there was the ghost. His name was Li Jiwon. He was a sergeant in the human special forces. Before the war, he had been a hunter in the mountains. He knew how to track animals through the forest. He knew how to move without making sound. He knew how to kill without being seen. The first time Vorath heard about him was after a massacre. A forward observation post. 30 soldiers, all dead. No weapons fired. No alarms raised. Just 30 bodies arranged in neat rows, their throats cut from behind, and a message carved into a tree. Go home. The message was written in Cathari script. The humans had learned their language. They had studied their enemy. They had prepared. Li Jiwan operated alone behind Cathari lines for 3 weeks. In that time, he killed 94 soldiers. Varath knew this because the humans kept records. They counted every kill. They documented every mission. They were proud of what they had done. The ghost never attacked the same way twice. Sometimes he used a knife. Sometimes he used a wire. Sometimes he used his bare hands. He killed officers in their tents. He killed soldiers in their sleep. He killed pilots sitting in their aircraft. He was everywhere and nowhere. Varath's soldiers stopped sleeping. They could not. Every shadow might hide the ghost. Every sound might be his footsteps. They fired at trees and bushes and their own reflections. They screamed at nothing. They lost their minds to fear. The Cathari could smell fear. It was part of their biology. They could detect the chemicals that frightened creatures released. This ability had made them excellent hunters for thousands of years. No prey could hide from them. No enemy could disguise their terror. But the humans learned to control their fear. Varath did not understand how this was possible. Fear was a chemical reaction. It was automatic. It could not be controlled by willpower alone. But the humans did it anyway. They slowed their breathing. They calmed their hearts. They suppressed the chemicals that would give them away. They became invisible in ways that had nothing to do with camouflage. Li Jiwan never smelled afraid. Not once. Varath had studied the sensor logs obsessively. The ghost moved through Cathari camps surrounded by 10,000 soldiers, and he smelled like the trees around him. Like the wind. Like nothing at all. Commander Thesk became obsessed with killing the ghost. He sent his best hunters after him. They never came back. He set traps with bait and sensors and force fields. The ghost walked through them like they did not exist. He offered rewards for information. His soldiers had nothing to report except more dead bodies. The breaking point came on Andong Ridge. It was a strategic position overlooking the main Cathari supply route. Thesk established his command post there. 500 soldiers guarded him day and night. Sensors covered every approach. Floodlights turned night into day. Nothing could reach the commander without being detected. Li Jiwan reached him anyway. Varath was on patrol that night. He heard the screaming on his radio. By the time he reached the command post, it was over. Commander Thesk was dead, impaled on a flagpole bearing the Terra Nova banner. His guards were dead around him. 43 soldiers killed without a single shot fired, and at the base of the flagpole, resting in a small pile, were military identification tags. Human dog tags. Li Jiwan's dog tags. A calling card. A signature. A message. The message was clear. I was here. I could have killed anyone. I chose your commander. Next time, I might choose you. Varath picked up the dog tags with trembling hands. They were warm. The ghost had been there only moments before. He could be watching right now. He could be anywhere. Mila sat completely still. Her recording device had been forgotten. She stared at Varath with something between horror and fascination. Did you ever catch him? She asked. Varath shook his head slowly. No, we never caught Li Jiwan. We never even saw him clearly. He was a shadow. A nightmare. A story we told ourselves to explain why our soldiers kept dying. Some of my troops believed he was not real. They believed he was a demon from human mythology, a monster that could not be killed. What happened to him? He survived the war. He returned to his mountains. He became a hunter again. Sometimes I think about him, living his quiet life, walking through forests that no longer hide enemies. I wonder if he thinks about us. I wonder if he remembers the soldiers he killed. I wonder if he has nightmares too. Vorath paused. His voice became very quiet. But mostly I wonder something else. Li Jiwan was one human. One special forces soldier with a knife and a talent for silence. There are billions of humans in the galaxy, and their military trains thousands of soldiers like him every year. Thousands of ghosts. Thousands of nightmares. If one man could do what Li Jiwan did, what could an army of them do? The question hung in the air like smoke, like a warning, like a promise. The ground campaign was bad, Vorath continued, but the worst was yet to come. After Thesk died, the High Command made a terrible decision. They decided to use orbital bombardment. They decided to burn human cities from space. They thought this would break human morale. They thought this would end the war quickly. His voice cracked slightly. They were so wrong. The bombardment did not break the humans. It united them. It transformed them. It turned them from defenders into something far more dangerous. It turned them into avengers. Mila leaned forward. What happened? Vorath looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death, too much destruction, too much war. Operation Harvest Moon happened, he said softly. The day the humans stopped defending and started destroying. The day I learned what human rage truly looked like. The day I lost my arms and nearly lost my life. He touched the stumps where his missing arms had once been. The day I learned that mercy can be more terrifying than revenge. The memory came back to Vorath like a wound that never healed. 30 years had passed, but he could still see every moment of that day. He could still hear the screams. He could still smell the blood. Both purple and red, Inchin Station was a small place. Just an asteroid with tunnels carved into it. The humans had built it to mine rare metals from the belt. It was not a military target. It was not even important. The High Command had chosen it because it was isolated. Because it would be easy. Because it would send a message to the rest of humanity. Vorath had commanded the assault from his ship. He watched his soldiers load into breach pods. 2,000 of the Dominion's finest warriors. They wore heavy armor. They carried plasma rifles. They had trained for years to become perfect killing machines. The breach pods launched like angry insects. They crossed the dark space between the fleet and the station in moments. They attached to the station's hull with magnetic clamps. They burned through the metal with cutting lasers. They opened like flowers blooming in reverse. The first wave poured into the station. 100 soldiers. More than enough to secure the landing zone. Vorath watched their life signs on his display. Green lights blinking steadily. His soldiers were alive and moving. Then the lights started going out, one by one. Then 2 at a time. Then 10. Then 20. The green lights turned red and disappeared. No distress calls. No weapons fire detected. Just silence and death. Vorath sent the second wave immediately. 200 more soldiers. They found the first wave scattered throughout the entry corridor. Dead. All of them dead. But not from plasma fire. Not from explosions. They had been killed with hands and tools. One soldier had been strangled with electrical cables. Another had been stabbed through the eye with a mining pick. A third had been beaten to death with a metal pipe. The humans had come out of the walls, out of the vents, out of the darkness. They had killed without sound and vanished without trace. Vorath felt something he had never felt before in his long military career. He felt afraid. The station commander was a human male named Park Do-won. Vorath learned his name later from captured records. Do-won had been a Marine before becoming a civilian administrator. He had fought in human wars on distant planets. He knew how to defend a position against a superior enemy. His voice crackled over the intercepted communications. Calm, steady, almost friendly. "Attention all personnel. The bugs are inside our home. They think we are weak because we are few. They think we will surrender because we are afraid. They are wrong. We are miners. We know these tunnels better than we know our own families. We know every shadow, every corner, every hiding place." Vorath listened to the message with growing unease. They want our station. They want our families. They want our future. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to make them pay. We are going to make them bleed. We are going to make them remember this day for the rest of their short, miserable lives. Every corridor they take will cost them 10 soldiers. Every room will cost them 20. By the time they reach the command center, they will wish they had never heard of Ancient Station. The humans fought like nothing Vorath had ever seen. They did not form lines. They did not hold positions. They moved like water through the tunnels, striking and vanishing, killing and disappearing. His soldiers could not find them, could not predict them, could not stop them. A group of human miners collapsed a tunnel on 50 Cathari soldiers. A human engineer rigged a cargo bay to vent into space, killing 30 more. A human mother killed 2 soldiers with a kitchen knife before they could reach her. Children. Vorath sent wave after wave into the station. His soldiers pushed forward through the bodies, through the blood, through the screaming and the dying. They took ground 1 meter at a time. They paid for every meter in lives. 6 hours. That was how long the battle lasted. 6 hours for 2,000 elite soldiers to capture a mining station defended by 400 civilians. 847 Cathari died. 312 humans died. The ratio was wrong. The ratio was impossible. But it was true. The last stand was in the command center. 43 humans remained. They had barricaded the doors with furniture and equipment. They had armed themselves with whatever they could find. They knew they were going to die. But they were not going to die alone. Park. Dohan stood at the center of the room. He held a plasma rifle taken from a dead Cathari soldier. His face was covered in blood. Some of it was his own. Most of it was not. He looked at his people and spoke one last time. "It has been an honor," he said simply. The Cathari breached the barricade. The fighting was brutal and short. Dohan killed 7 soldiers before he fell. The others fought just as hard, just as fierce. They did not beg. They did not surrender. They died on their feet, weapons in hand. But Kim Yuna was not there. Vorath found out where she was when the explosion ripped through the station. She had gone to the reactor. She had bypassed the safety systems. She had waited until enough Cathari soldiers were in the lower levels. Then she had pressed the button. The explosion killed 200 soldiers instantly. It damaged the station so badly that Vorath had to evacuate his remaining troops. The mission was a technical success. The station was captured, but it felt like a defeat. Vorath had walked through the ruins personally. He had seen the bodies. He had seen the damage. He had found Kim Yuna near the melted reactor core. The blast had killed her instantly, but her body was somehow untouched. And she was smiling. Even in death, she was smiling. That smile haunted Vorath for 30 years. That smile told him everything he needed to know about humans. They were not afraid of death. They were not afraid of pain. They were afraid of failure. They were afraid of letting down their people. And they would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect what they loved. Mila had stopped taking notes. She sat frozen in her chair, staring at Vorath with wide eyes. "Surely that was unusual," she said quietly. "Surely that was just desperate civilians fighting for survival. Your real soldiers must have done better against their real soldiers." Vorath laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who had seen too much. Lost too much. Survived too much. That is what I thought too. That is what the High Command thought. Desperate civilians. Cornered animals. Nothing to worry about. We would crush their military easily. He leaned forward. His compound eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. We were fools. Engine Station was a warning. A small taste of what humans could do. Their civilians had killed nearly half my soldiers with mining tools and kitchen knives. Their military had trained for generations. Their military had weapons designed specifically for killing. Their military had soldiers who did not know how to give up. Vara stood and walked to the window again. The stars looked cold and distant. The civilians of Engine Station made us bleed. The soldiers of Terra Nova made us scream. And there was one soldier in particular who became our nightmare. We called him the Ghost, the Fog, the Darkness that Walks. His real name was Lee Ji-won, and he's the reason I still cannot sleep without the lights on. Mila's recording device continued its steady blinking. The blue light pulsed like a heartbeat, like a warning. "Tell me about him," she whispered. Vorath turned to face her. His scarred face looked older than ever, tired, broken. "The ghost of Andong Ridge," he said softly. "That is where our screaming began." The old Cathari sat alone in the dark room. His name was Vorath. Once, he had been a great commander. Once, he had led thousands of soldiers into battle. Now, he was just an old creature with too many memories and not enough arms. He had lost 2 of his 4 arms in the war. The stumps had healed long ago, but they still ached when he thought about that day. The day a human pilot flew her ship directly into his carrier. The day he learned that humans did not fight like other species. The door opened and soft light spilled into the room. A young Cathari female entered. She carried recording equipment in her arms and a nervous expression on her face. Her name was Mila, and she was a historian. She worked for the Imperial Archive, collecting stories from veterans of the old wars. "Commander Vorath," she said, bowing her head slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Vorath clicked his mandibles. It was the Cathari way of showing dark amusement. "I am no longer a commander, young one. I am just Vorath now. Just an old soldier with stories that give him nightmares." Mila set up her equipment on the table between them. She noticed that Vorath had chosen to sit far from the window. His chair faced the door. His remaining 2 arms rested on the table, ready to move at any moment. After 30 years of peace, the old warrior still could not relax. "The Archive wants to preserve the memories of those who fought in the Terran Contact War," Mila explained. "Future generations should know what happened. They should understand. Understand?" Vorath's compound eyes seemed to darken. "No one who was not there can understand. But I will try to explain. I owe that much to the dead. Both our dead and theirs." Mila activated her recording device. A small blue light began to blink. "Please start from the beginning. Tell me about your first contact with humans." Vorath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, like he was speaking from somewhere far away. "I was stationed on Kepler 442b when the orders came. The Dominion had found a new species. They called themselves humans. They lived on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. They had only recently learned to travel between stars. They were weak, primitive, easy prey." He paused and clicked his mandibles again. This time, there was no amusement in the sound. The Cathari Dominion had conquered 40 species before humans. 40 worlds brought under our control. 40 civilizations that learned to bow before our strength. We were the greatest military power in the known galaxy. We had never lost a war. We had never met an enemy we could not crush. Mila leaned forward slightly. What did the intelligence reports say about humans? They said humans were soft. No natural armor. No claws. No poison. They could not see in the dark like we could. They could not smell fear like we could. They lived short lives and bred slowly. They had been fighting wars among themselves for their entire history. We thought this made them weak, divided. Vorath's remaining hands curled into fists on the table. The High Command gave us 3 rotations to complete the subjugation. 3 rotations to conquer an entire species. They sent my fleet because I was efficient. Because I had never failed. Because I was very good at breaking the will of lesser species. And what happened? Mela asked softly. We did not understand what we had awakened. Vorath's voice dropped to barely a whisper. We saw their soft bodies and thought they were fragile. We saw their short lives and thought they had nothing to fight for. We saw their history of war and thought they were primitive. We were wrong about everything. He raised his head and looked directly at Mila. His compound eyes reflected the blinking blue light of the recorder. Let me tell you something about humans that the intelligence reports never mentioned. They are pack hunters. Not like the Vrek, who hunt in swarms. Not like the Thesari, who hunt alone. Humans hunt in small groups, families. They call them squads. And they do not fight for territory or resources or pride. They fight for each other. Mila's antennae twitched. I don't understand. All species fight for resources. Humans do too. But when you threaten one human, you threaten all of them. When you hurt one human, every human feels the pain. They are connected in ways we did not understand. Ways we still do not fully understand. They will die for strangers. They will cross the galaxy to rescue one of their own. They will burn worlds to avenge their dead. Vorath stood up slowly. His old joints creaked. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the human homeworld spun around its yellow sun. Somewhere out there, billions of humans went about their lives, living, loving, laughing, waiting. The first battle was at a mining station called Inchin, Var said without turning around. It was a small outpost. 400 humans. Civilians mostly. Miners. Engineers. Families. We sent 2,000 of our best soldiers. We expected the battle to last 1 hour. How long did it last? 6 hours. We lost 847 soldiers. 847 of our finest warriors. Killed by miners with tools. Killed by engineers with welding torches. Killed by mothers protecting their children. Mila's recording device continued its quiet blinking. The room felt colder somehow. There was a human female named Kim Yuna, Vorath continued. His voice had become distant again, lost in memory. She was a communications officer. When we finally breached the command center, we found her near the reactor. She had rigged it to explode. She was waiting for us, waiting for enough of us to enter the room. What happened? She smiled at us. She actually smiled. And then she pressed the button. 200 of our soldiers died in that explosion. We found pieces of them scattered across 3 levels. But Kim Yuna's body was intact. The blast had thrown her against a wall. And she was still smiling. Vorath turned back to face Mila. The young historian had gone very still. That was day 1, he said. That was a mining station with civilians and a handful of security guards. That was not even their military. That was just ordinary humans defending their home. He returned to his chair and sat down heavily. His old bones ached. His missing arms ached. His heart ached with memories he could never escape. You want to know about the Terran Contact War? You want future generations to understand? Then let me tell you about the real soldiers. Let me tell you about the ghosts that hunted us in the forests. Let me tell you about the pilots who laughed as they died. Let me tell you about the admiral who broke our fleet with nothing but determination and rage. Mila swallowed hard. Please continue. Varath nodded slowly. The Battle of Inchin Station was just the beginning. What came next was far worse. What came next still haunts my dreams, 30 years later. Are you sure you want to hear this? Yes, Mila said, though her voice trembled slightly. Then listen carefully, young one. Listen and remember. Because the humans certainly remember. They never forget. And they never forgive.